Welcome back to Movie Guy, everyone. Today we're doing another Disney classic, Beauty and the Beast. This is the original version, not the remake that came out a few years ago. Buckle up, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in this one, so let's get right into it. Okay, Beauty and the Beast starts us off in a faraway land. That's the way they describe it. Okay, it's really just France. Anyway, this prince lives in the castle. He's supposed to be selfish and unkind. One night, an old beggar woman shows up and she offers the prince a single rose in exchange for a place to stay for the night. We're told that the prince sees how ugly she is and sends her away. Okay, let's pause for a moment. So, an old beggar woman shows up at this guy's place and he turns her away because she's ugly? Honestly, it just seems like a bad deal. She's offering him a rose for a place to stay. It's a castle. It's got to be expensive. If you're trying to take the moral high ground and say that he should let anybody in regardless of how they look, why even bother introducing the rose? Why not say she showed up and asked for free to be let in? Okay, so because he doesn't let her in, the beggar woman reveals that she's an enchantress and that actually she was just testing him, and the prince starts apologizing. I still don't understand why he's apologizing though. I mean, it's this random woman off the street. He doesn't know who she is. Anyway, the apology's no good, and she decides that to teach him a lesson, she's going to change the entire castle into inanimate objects, and he has until his 21st birthday to find true love, and that will undo the spell. And in the meantime, she's leaving behind two items for him, a magic mirror and a rose that wilts at sort of unpredictable times, and when the rose is done wilting, that's sort of the end of his time. The mirror is magic, by the way, and it shows you whatever you want in the world. I still don't understand why she gave it to him. It's not like she knew he was going to be a spoiled brat and not want to leave the castle for 10 years. If he wants to see something, he can just go see it. I think it's also worth pointing out that he has until his 21st birthday to break the spell, and we find out later in the movie that they've been in the castle for 10 years, which means that the prince couldn't have been any more than 11 years old when she cast the spell on him. So this enchantress, on her spare time mind you, goes around dressing up like a beggar woman and shows up at the door of an 11-year-old boy, and when he doesn't do the right thing, she punishes an entire castle full of adults. Okay, let's fast forward 10 years. We're being introduced to Belle, who lives in this provincial town somewhere in a faraway land, France. Belle is thinking about how she wants adventure, but every day in this poor provincial town in France is the same. In the morning, there's the baker who comes out every day with his rolls and bread like always. He's a baker, Belle. That's what he does for a living. Frankly, the town seems pretty nice. Every day people come out and say bonjour. They're so happy and jovial. Meanwhile, while she's talking trash about this poor baker behind his back who's just working hard to try to scratch out a living, he actually is nice enough to ask her what she's doing for the morning. What a sweetheart. She's not shy at all to tell him she just read the most wonderful book about a beanstalk and an ogre. Yeah, that's right. She's giving people crap about being simple-minded while she's reading Jack and the Beanstalk at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we're back. So Belle's off to the bookstore to return a book that she recently borrowed and see if there's anything new. To which the shopkeeper replies, "Not since yesterday." Hours and hours reading children's books. So since there are no more books left in this bookstore that Belle has not read, she decides she's going to borrow her favorite book again. And the bookstore owner points out she's already read it twice, but she says she likes it so much, and the bookstore owner decides to give it to her for free. Okay, lending books is one thing. Giving them away? Seriously? I mean, this entire town obviously has some serious disinclination towards educational enlightenment. She might be his only customer, and now he's giving books away for free. I mean, how does this guy stay in business? Okay, Bella's put this bookstore owner practically out of business, but she heads off to spend the rest of her morning reading over by a fountain, and certainly some local shepherd is probably fired since these sheep are obviously everywhere and nobody's keeping an eye on them. In fact, one of the sheep actually comes over and starts eating a page out of her book. Now, Belle doesn't seem to mind, which I find kind of disrespectful given that the shopkeeper just gave her her favorite book for free, and seconds later, she's allowing these sheep to just tear her book to shreds. I'm not angry, Belle. I'm just disappointed. Now it's at this point that we're introduced to another character in our story, Gaston. This guy is strong and a good hunter, and the entire town generally considers him to be a good catch. All the women are swooning over him, but he's got his eyes set on Belle. It's not clear exactly what their relationship is at this point. They certainly know of each other. They live in the same town, but more than likely they're acquaintances and certainly not more than friends. Anyway, Gaston knows his worth, and he starts telling his trusty sidekick LeFou he's going to propose to her, and he's very confident that she's going to accept his proposal because really every girl in town probably would. In fact, he's so confident that he actually starts singing "I'm going to make Belle my wife" right in the middle of the square, which is pretty nuts when you consider the fact that Belle is in the square at the exact same time. In fact, if you can't catch them, there's Gaston and there's Belle. That's how close they are. I mean, in a town like this where everybody continuously gossips, it's already a bad idea to just blab about the fact that you're going to be proposing soon. But when the person you're proposing to is probably like 20 yards away, you really should just keep your mouth shut. You're going to spoil the surprise. Okay, next we get a serious Disney cinematic cringe moment as Belle is trying to leave the town and Gaston starts laying it on her pretty thick in this sequence here. Gaston's courtship sequence begins harmless enough with him positioning himself directly in front of her, just like every girl dreams of. He then immediately follows that up by plucking her favorite book right out of her hands as she's walking by. Again, nothing too crazy here. Next, he decides it's a good idea to berate the kind of books that she's reading, and that's really more just telling about him, but he decides to throw her book right into the mud because she should be paying attention to more important things. Again, nothing really cringe just yet, but we're warming up. Okay, so this is where it starts to get a little bit awkward. Here we see Gaston saying you should pay attention to me, and you see Belle looking at her book in the mud, and instead of saying something to Gaston, she actually reaches around him to grab her book, which is kind of lowly. I mean, maybe stand up for yourself a little bit. Okay, this next part is where it really gets wild. Okay, this is a direct quote from Gaston. He starts off by saying, "The whole town's talking about it. It's not right for a woman to read." Soon she starts getting ideas and thinking. Talk about a scene that did not age well. Now you may think this is as bad as it gets, but I would argue it actually gets worse because of what Belle says back. She just says, "Gaston, you are simply primeval, and what I like to call Belle-O-Well." Mind you, it's not just Gaston that's primeval, it's the entire town. She doesn't care that the entire town is talking smack about her. So Belle starts walking again towards her house as Gaston plucks the book out of her hand and invites her for a drink at the tavern. And as they do so, we pass these three ladies called the Bimbettes. Awesome name. And they are constantly fawning over Gaston because of how attractive they think he is. Now the Bimbettes don't make a lot of sense to me. They obviously drew them to be three attractive women. The whole point that they're supposed to make is that they're fawning over Gaston and saying what is wrong with her that Belle is not interested in Gaston. He's gorgeous and amazing, and if that's the point that they're making, wouldn't it make more sense to make them unattractive? Wait, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Belle finally squeezes past Gaston and says she has to go help her father, and LeFou thinks this is the perfect time to say, "That old loon, he needs all the help he can get," and he and Gaston start laughing it up. And this is the first time that Belle actually gets visibly upset and says, "Don't talk about my father that way." I mean, you were literally just on your hands and knees reaching around Gaston to get your favorite book out of the mud where he threw it, and you didn't say a word to him about it. But LeFou makes one joke about your dad and you flip out? I don't get it. The most magical part about all of this is that finally when Belle decides to stand up for her father, who is working in this house behind her, you see an explosion come out of the house, which makes him look like an old loon that needs all the help he can get. So Belle goes running in to help her father, and immediately there are about 20 things that do not make sense. About the only thing that does make sense is that as soon as we see Belle enter the basement where her father was working on the invention that just exploded, we see Belle greeted with a cloud of smoke and she starts coughing. Her father, on the other hand, is upside down inside of a barrel next to the invention. Keep in mind that the invention itself seems to be perfectly fine, and her father, despite being older and in the enclosed space when the explosion happened, does not cough once. Her father, Maurice, is very frustrated with this hunk of junk, as he calls it, and says, "I'll never get this to work," but Belle, ever supportive of her father, whispers in his ear that he will get it to work and win first prize at the fair tomorrow and become a world-famous inventor. More on that in a minute, but in the meantime, Maurice has work to do, so he gets right back to it. And as you can see, the machine is perfectly fine. What's it going to take to turn this seemingly hopeless hunk of junk into the world-famous invention that Maurice claims it to be? Not much, as it turns out. As Maurice gets under the machine to start working on it, he's already holding one tool that looks like a wrench, but he has to ask Belle for a second tool, a dog-legged clincher, this tool here, which I have no idea what that is. And then he needs a third tool that he is reaching for underneath the machine. Don't know what that is, looks like some kind of Swiss Army knife. Anyway, these are the only tools he needs to bring this machine back from the dead after its enormous explosion. How long does it take to fix the machine? Exactly 30 seconds. I timed it. But who cares how long it took? I mean, the guy just invented something amazing. He's about to be a world-famous inventor. Isn't that awesome? Yes, that's right. Starting today for just $200,000, this machine can be all yours since it's basically a furnace on wheels. Okay, it's not just a furnace on wheels. This machine, which is going to make this man a world-famous inventor, chops wood for you. That's what it does. That's the entire thing that it does. It chops wood. That's it. I should specify that although they make it seem like there's multiple pieces of wood flying through the air, you can see very clearly that there is only one piece of wood set up on the block to be chopped from the moment that the machine starts. So theoretically, you would have to put the pieces of wood in yourself each time before it was chopped. After the axe comes down, chopping the wood in two, the wood flies dangerously through the air, almost hitting both of them in the head, and lands neatly in a pile of wood on the other side of the room. Very convenient. Maurice is thrilled and ready to head off to the fair and share his invention with the world, but not before a block of wood hits him directly in the head. We'll work out the kinks later.